Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hearts Wide Open. Today with me, I have another great guest, Nikki, one of our members of Hearts Wide Open family. Yes. And we're going to talk about an episode that I think a lot of you guys will find very interesting. It's about the role of woman and female in men's mental health. But before we dive deeper into the topic, Nikki, I want you to introduce yourself. First of all, how would you like to be introduced?
Well, first off, I'm Nikki, 23 years young, and I love calling myself recently as a mindfulness artist because of course, my psychology training, and then also the fact that I'm a dancer. I love specifically blending those two. I think we've talked about that a lot as well. So yeah, if I had to give myself a short label, it will be a mindfulness artist.
A mindfulness artist. And what is a mindfulness artist?
Someone that goes beyond the idea of just creation, but kind of putting out something out there to share with other people that, have a certain depth to it and have a certain layer of psychology, a certain layer of self, a certain layer of community. And it would extend beyond just art, but more so something to really share with the world.
Interesting. Okay. Very glad to have you. I think you are the first member of Hearts Wide Open family that we're having on board with the podcast. So I'm also very happy to have you here. So back to the main topic. Yeah. I think we briefly talked with Nikki before we come to this episode. And you specifically wanted to talk about this episode, about the role of woman and female in men's mental health. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering why this topic is so much interesting for you.
A little bit about me is that I've been training in psychology specifically for over 6 years now. So I did my bachelor's in Dubai, I did my master's here in the Netherlands. And throughout, I've been really passionate about, topics of women's psychology and domestic violence and trauma and things like that. And something that I especially started coming into when I was doing my master's and with my amazing professors as well is a certain amount of, empathy and understanding that advocating for topics of domestic violence or women's psychology is not just about the woman. It's also about the other half of our community, which are men. And for me personally, it had such a deep impact because going into that sort of perspective, zooming out from the women's context alone or the children's context alone or the developmental context alone, it helped me understand even for myself and have empathy for the men in my life. And then I started to realize that a lot of our community issues or a lot of mental health problems that we often talk about might help to zoom out a little bit and then also put yourself in the other person's shoes and see it from that aspect. And it felt like divine intervention, if I may, to see Hearts Wide Open was looking for new team members. And I was like, okay, well, this is perfectly in line with what I am starting to understand and starting to be passionate about, that it can't just be a one-track focus in psychology. I want to be able to zoom out for myself as a professional and get involved in something that's bigger, more meaningful, and honestly more impactful. And this was a perfect place to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're very glad to have you. Yeah. So you said, correct me if I'm wrong, so basically through your courses, you had something that was more around women's psychology and to study that, and you thought that, okay, maybe it's not just gender specific, this kind of psychology. So you wanted to zoom out to see how that relates to men as well. Yeah. So I wanted to... does this ring a bell? Because you use the word specifically to see the different aspect of something. I'm wondering if what you said, did it help you to see who or is someone in your life, their situation from a different aspect?
Oh my God, yeah. So I'm totally okay with sharing this, but growing up, I haven't had the most ideal male role models in my life. I had many strong female role models. And for a long time, that did harbor a lot of resentment in me, a lot of mistrust towards men in particular.
Why?
I think just because, for example, when it starts at home with a dad that isn't around as much, you start to already be on guard because you haven't had that learning or that exposure to what it's like to differentiate between, having what kind of needs does my mom cater to, and then what kind of needs does my dad cater to. And for a long time, I would be more of the avoidant type that's like, I don't need my dad. And it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to realize that, no, wait, actually, maybe I did. And then when I started to realize that, I started to feel a lot of anger towards him. And then, of course, throughout my life, it wasn't just my dad, but it was also a few, I wouldn't call them partners, but individuals who I happened to cross paths with. And I didn't realize right at the start that a lot of the bad experiences that went on there was my own lack of awareness of my own boundaries, right? And lack of understanding of what it is to conduct myself in that sort of situation, which then eventually, of course, you would blame your dad in the end because it's like, you weren't there to teach me. So how am I supposed to deal with this?
But where did you...
Change?
No, I want to know, like, where was the point that I was like, if I don't, because you said you blame your dad.
Yeah.
Why? And you said because you were not there to teach me. Mm-hmm. What were those teaching that you expected your dad to teach you, for example?
Something as simple as like my father, when I was very young, he was not the type of person that would, say, I love you, for example. I think maybe my entire life I've heard it from him thrice.
This is every Middle Eastern father out there. If you're watching this, tell to your people around you that you love them.
It's so important. It is so important to be able to hear that. And I'm going to say something controversial. Hearing that when you're young in your early foundation years, hearing it from the right people makes it not that big of a deal. And at the same time, a big deal. Because, for example, you grow up not hearing that from someone as important as your dad. Tomorrow, when you have maybe a random friend or a partner that tells you, I love you, you're gonna sit there for a second and be like, why? And I was curious why I always felt like that whenever I heard it later on.
Did you question why?
I used to. I used to question why. And I realized the impact of like not having a stable foundation on particularly my male friendships growing up, because I would either, just not be able to create that many friendships just because I felt something off and I would close myself off.
With males?
Yeah, specifically. And I would have a lot of mistrust. And then if it wasn't like that, then I would be okay with being friends with them, but then I would find everything that they do weird. Like, if they're texting me to say, hey, good morning, how are you? I'd be like, why are you texting me? What do you want? Right? And I would always assume all of their intentions to be a certain way. And then as I grew older, that also extended to women, right? And like all of my friendships, like it got worse. Naturally, it got worse because I didn't understand the root cause of it. And different relationships going so haywire, having to learn things for myself. It was only, I think maybe in the last 3 years, especially with my master's program, that I was able to sit and understand, see that, okay, it's bigger than just me. It's bigger than just a women thing. It's bigger than just a men thing. But you have to understand yourself, you have to understand the world around you. And to understand the world around you, you have to zoom out from looking at things through a specific lens. and consider the villain's perspective. Consider the side character's perspective.
It's interesting that you use the word villain.
Yeah.
Is that how you looked at, for example, your father back then, or male figures in your life?
Yeah, I think it's very common actually for a lot of us to villainize a lot of people in our lives. Especially when you start understanding that, okay, maybe years of your life you felt confused, and then when you start realizing that, wait, I was confused because of this person, you're automatically already villainizing someone. And I think it's a very common human tendency, because that's what we do. We like to blame everyone else for our issues. That's instinct. And then it takes work to, again, zoom out and try to understand why you feel that way, accept that you feel that way, and start to learn how to accept why the other person felt that way. And that's when you step out of the villain thing. But the villainization is always first instinct. It's human nature. Yeah.
I understand. And I'm curious on, you said you always assumed. So then how was your friendship group? Were they mostly female? Because you said with the males, you assumed they always want something. Or if someone texts me, because I'm having a difficult time to understand why. Because I understand, okay, let's say I didn't have a male role model that I could look up to in my life. And then if someone later in the street tells me I love you, for me it's a big deal, because like, wow, nobody ever told me that they love me. So what's going on here? But I miss the connection between the part that they want something from me necessarily. So yeah, maybe you could, if you want to, I don't know.
No, of course.
As much as you would like to share, you could shed light on something.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm going to try to weave this in a way that's like super simple too, because there's so many layers to this, and that's why I think I fell in love with psychology, because it's like there's never too many layers. There's always so many ways to look at it. But let me paint you a picture here. So you have a dad that isn't usually, always around. But when he is, it's usually for something that benefits him as well. Like, for example, or it's based on his convenience. So if he doesn't have a work meeting that day, or if he doesn't have too many business meetings, then he will sit down and have a conversation with you. There was also an impact of how his relationship was with my mother. And a 4-year-old or a 10-year-old trying to make sense of what is normal starts with that relationship. It starts with the relationship at home. So a lot of exposure to how transactional things can be, or things are, between my parents naturally went out into the school environment when I started. And then you have layers of my relationship with my mother. And of course, Middle Eastern, Indian parents, enough said, grades equals good kid. Yeah. And it's not that she put too much pressure on me, but there was still that pressure to, succeed, be perfect. And then in this little recipe we have so far, you also throw in an overweight kid. So I was in a school environment, extremely overweight for medical reasons, but of course kids don't understand that. So you have bullying in there. And I think I spent almost all years except the last 2 years in my school severely bullied for my weight by teachers, by students, it was a mess. And my mom was a teacher in that school too, so that was another reason for them to not like me, because I got straight A's regardless.
Nobody likes the kid of the teacher.
No one does. I told my mom this too. We argued so many times, but she's like, it's fine. But no, she helped me through a lot of stuff. Mom, if you're watching, I love you. And Dad too. Don't be mad. So we're all good now. But at that time, it was just so many messages and so many signals from almost every environment that I was exposed to as a kid, right? And one core thing that I can extract from all of it is how transactional everything felt. So I have to do A for you to be B. And if you're doing B, then that means you want C. And a lot of self-awareness gets pushed out, like the opportunities to be self-aware, the opportunities to know what it is that you want and what your role is in these situations, whether you can say yes or no. A lot of those opportunities are missed when you grow up in a mixed environment like that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. When you especially use the transactional part, I totally understand. Then when it was convenient for someone to do something or practical, then they call you, or then they like, oh yeah, let's go out. Or also in friendships, like sometimes I have this in friendships that someone doesn't call me forever, and when they need something, and they're like, oh yeah, Soroosh, there's Soroosh in Amsterdam that I'm gonna stay at his place. And I hate it. Like, also, I was having this conversation with someone about this transactional relationship. I think it's also a very interesting topic to do a whole episode on, because I think especially, I don't know if you agree, but I think in European culture, I think sometimes things are a little bit more transactional from my observation. Like we were at the friend's house and we had a guest because the guest did something nice for us for the podcast, and we wanted to invite him for dinner, for example. And before that, he brought a bottle of wine, but then we went out for dinner, and we were gonna pay for the dinner anyway because he already did something nice for us. And then when we paid, he was like, "Yeah, well, it's equal to the bottle of wine." And for me, it was like, why do you have to make it so, for example, transactional that, oh, I did this, so then that? But for me, it's also a borderline, you know? I don't know. I think it kind of, for me, relates to how much boundaries you also set for yourself. If I love someone, if I care for someone, I will do without any expectations for them A, B, C, D. But then I feel like there would be a time that I also expect you to do this for me, that I expect you to, if I wake up, you make breakfast. If I'm tired, you do something. Because on the other hand, I also did that for you. Yeah. So I don't know, what do you think about this? What is the border of transactional relationships? Is it good? Is it bad? Or I was curious to hear your opinion about it.
Yeah, no, you're right. The whole idea and concept of transaction in human relationships, we could do maybe even 5 episodes about it. It's a huge, huge topic. And to answer your question first, the difference that you're noticing between, you know, Western versus Eastern cultures in terms of transaction, it's vastly, vastly different. And there's a cultural aspect to it that you also can't really ignore. So I've noticed, and it's are you familiar with, in psychology, the collectivist society and the individualistic society?
No.
Okay. So these, when it comes to cultural psychology specifically, we kind of differentiate groups of people into these two societies. And collectivist typically means the eastern part of the world, where it's more common to, for example, live with your extended family until you're 60, 65. And it's not considered like freeloading. But
it's not considered?
Freeloading.
Yeah.
You're just living as a family.
Yeah.
And then you have a more individualistic society, which is typical for the Western part of the world, where the kid's like out of the house by 18 or earlier. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just how the system has been. And that has a lot of cultural influence, a lot of religious influence, a lot of traditional influence as well. And it's always fascinating for me to see when now in this globalized world that we're in, and a lot of immigration, a lot of travel, watching those two cultures clash. And I was actually having a similar conversation with one of my Dutch friends here about how he personally doesn't like how straightforward, he didn't use the words transactional, he said straightforward, of how straightforward the Western society can be. So it's always like, yeah, I hosted you at my house last week, so now it's your turn. And it's not considered, rude or like you're asking for something. It's just, it's fair. Much stronger set of boundaries there. Hold on to that thought, because in the culturist, in the collectivist one, you will rarely hear someone say, oh, I hosted you in my house last week, so you're not welcome in my house this week. Rarely. It's always open door policy, hospitable, never say no. And there's something good about compassion, empathy, and a certain sense of community in those cultures. So the point that I'm coming to here is, if you look at this the healthy way, there's something to learn from the Western side about holding on to your boundaries and knowing when to say no, knowing when to draw a line. And then there's something to learn from the collectivistic one, which is having empathy for your fellow human, having a sense of compassion without expectation. That is what's going to make you feel like you want to help an old lady on the street, whether you know her or not. But the boundary is also what's going to protect you in case someone is crossing your personal space. And in my opinion, maybe it's quite common too, is knowing how to balance the two as an individual in this day and age, knowing how to balance what both cultures teach you. And in terms of transactional relationships, you're absolutely right. No, as much as everyone likes to say like, oh, you love me unconditionally or you don't love me unconditionally. And we all love talking about conditions and unconditions. Or unfortunately, you cannot really have human relationships without some expectation. There's always going to be a certain amount of expectation, because that draws back to what I said earlier. Human beings are inherently selfish. Inherently, we like to blame others, or we like to compare ourselves with each other. It's not something that can be ignored, but it's something that can be looked at in a much more compassionate way if you have that zoomed out understanding. It all ties together.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And how do you try to find this balance? And after that, I wonder, how do you radiate more compassion? Wow. Do you think you can invite people to be more compassionate?
100%. That's always possible. In terms of finding the balance myself, I'm still learning. Like there's still parts of me that can be a bit too selfish. They can be a bit too, I think that's where my impulsiveness can sometimes come from. And that's a trait that I have now started to accept that I have. And I'm almost 100% certain that I will never have a straight answer for you for that. Like, how do I get it myself? It's always going to be, I don't know, I'm trying, Yeah. And I think, recipe. Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the answer to that. You're never going to be 100% in balance, and that's something a lot of religion can also teach you. You can't be 100% perfect. You weren't made to be 100% perfect. Those sort of teachings, they really helped me also accept the fact that I can't be perfect. I can't be perfectly balanced. I can't know everything. I will never be, for my friends or my family, I will never be the perfect daughter, the perfect partner, the perfect friend, the perfect stranger. And having that knowledge of that alone and really soaking it in helps me find a certain amount of balance. And just by having conversations like this, talking to people, and considering every aspect and allowing someone to say, but this is how I feel about this, and like maybe this had an influence on that. Just talking about that can encourage people to find that balance for themselves. Just knowing that it's okay to talk about it, it's okay to have different perspectives, it's okay to have different experiences, it's okay to not agree, as long as you're talking about it.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
I liked it. Yeah. Thank you. So also thinking, for me, the change was very, I think, drastic. If I compare myself like to 6-7 years ago, I came from, as you say, a collectivist culture. Mm-hmm. Always giving, always inviting people from, always planning something so I can take everyone, do something. And at some point, I was like, whoa, if I don't call these people, who would call me? Or where's my boundary? Like, everybody always want to hang out at my place. If I ask Jason, hey, can I hang out? Oh, I'm busy. I was like, oh, maybe I should now move a little bit toward this individualist kind of society that now we live in. Yeah, you're right. Maybe my question was inherently wrong. Well, no question is inherently wrong. There's no right answer for it. Right or wrong answer.
There we go.
I always look at it as a balance, like a ping pong, that some weeks I feel more collectivist. I'm like, okay, let's have everyone over, have more compassion. I'm just giving. And sometimes I have more boundaries. I'm like, okay, really, I cannot do this more than this. And it just moves around,
Yeah. And that's self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like even being able to tell for yourself that, okay, this week I have more energy. So let's have the whole street over. And then being able to tell for yourself that, okay, this week I don't have energy, and not beating yourself up for it. Because that's something that can happen when you're coming from a collectivist. Because exactly as you said, right? Like we grow up in a society where even if you don't have a penny in your pocket, you will still give the shirt off your back to another person.
Yeah, I remember my parents were tired as fuck, and they would still invite guests 3 days in a row.
Wait, we can swear on the podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we can.
Love that.
But don't overdo it. Okay, I think Nikki changed to Nikki 2.0. Now it's starting. Yeah, but it's what you said. I think in that culture, I think it's around too much giving, which I think it can be good for the end that is receiving, but also I feel like you're always like, it's like a plant that always give fruit to everyone, and at the end is left like,
Yeah.
Sad. Okay. But to jump back into the topic of the role of women in men's health, you talked about the relationship with your dad, with your male friends and figures that you had in your life. And I'm curious, at the point that you realize, maybe I should zoom out. Maybe I should also hear the perspective of the other person. Mm-hmm. What did you do?
So that happened when my relationship ended with my first partner. And that was when I moved here. It was literally, I think, the first month that I moved here.
This is when?
August 2022. Yeah. So 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah. And I think my relationship with this person for the 3 years that we were together was probably my healthiest relationship with a person of the opposite gender. And he taught me a lot about the kind of things I was doing, like avoiding, accepting that, okay, maybe this is not everybody. Like my tendency to assume someone's intentions, or my tendency to assume that dishonesty is more common than authenticity. And he was the one that kind of opened my eyes to that and let me know, like, maybe consider that you're not the victim. And as harsh as that might be for some people to hear, and it was harsh for me for a long time, it was towards the end of that relationship that I really started to consider, because also I was in a country alone, all by myself for the first time in forever. No siblings, no extended family. Just me, myself, and I in a 19-meter square housing unit in this country that I've never been to, never even saw myself coming to. And my complicated relationship with my parents too. Like I had to already battle something as simple as going out at 9 p.m. to the grocery store to buy myself ice cream. And then I'm like, wait, shit, I need to text my mom to tell her where I am. But like realizing that, wait, no, maybe I don't need to.
This is when you were here. Okay.
Unlearning a lot of things. And then it was at that time, because the way we broke up also was, it went against like what we initially talked about. We said there's no such thing as a break. Like if you want to take a break, then it's just a breakup. And we took a break. And that messed with my head because I'm not also the kind of person to go back on my words. And so if I consider a break to be a breakup, I wouldn't entertain a break. But I did. And that went on, I think, for like 2 weeks. And that entire time I was questioning, I was considering everything that I had been through, that I'm going through, that I'm going towards, to understand what led up to this point and try to find me. And then out of nowhere, he decided to take the initiative and call it what it is. I called it a breakup. And it was at that point that I even realized that, wait a second, I knew this was coming. And it's not devastating me as much as I thought it was, because this was a guy I thought I was going to marry, settle down, everything. And I didn't cry. And I was wondering, why am I not crying? I'm not feeling that grief. I'm not feeling anything particularly. And then he did something. And Nerd, if you're watching, I call him Nerd. Nerd, if you're watching this, I'm going to share this moment. You don't know this. He promised he was going to listen to the podcast. We're besties now. But the moment he told me, because we shared our location on Find My. Yeah. And the moment it wasn't, I'm breaking up with you. It was, disconnect me from your Find My. That shattered me. And I couldn't understand why that was more impactful. Not knowing where this person is more impactful than not having this person in my life in a certain way. And then I started to really consider what different things meant to me, why knowledge of where this person is at all times was more important to me than what that person thinks of me or how they relate to me. And also considering the very valuable fact that he was a man and what that meant, because I never felt that way with anyone. And then I realized some similarities of how, it was important for me, for the few people that I really care about and I love very much. It's more important for me to know where they are, not how they are. Then I started to realize that, okay, it's an element of control. It allows me to understand that, okay, if they're there, then I know what their next step is going to be. So I know that they're safe and fine. I don't care if they check in with me. I don't care if they're talking to me. As long as I know that they're safe and fine. Then I started to realize that, okay, I never actually knew, where my dad was or like what he was up to. And there was a time in my life where I really missed him. And there was a time when he was pretty unpredictable. So sometimes if he's having a bad day at work or something, he'll come home and there'll be fights. Or if I have homework and I'm not able to anticipate that he's busy on the laptop, there have been times where he has badly screamed at me for asking him to look at a drawing that I made or help me with my homework. And I would have to run to my mom in fear. And when I started to make like similar parallels to this, I was like, okay, it's an element of control, and it's my way of trying to anticipate the people I love, how they're feeling and what their next move might be, if there's a fight coming, if they're not doing okay. And for some reason, I felt responsible for that. also tying in the fact that I would take care of my mom a lot. So if she was upset, if she was sick, if she was unwell, a lot of that from a very young age, it was on me to take care of her. And again, no siblings, so it's just me, right? And then when I started to realize that control it plays a big role in my life, I used what I was learning in my master's and the kind of teachings that we were exposed to really understand, okay, what is X person or Y person giving me that makes me feel so attached to them, that makes me feel like I need to control where they are or like be able to perceive where they are and how they're doing. Why do I insist that I need less than I'm able to give? Why do I not demand for myself? Why do I not set boundaries for myself? Why do I value myself less than the people I care about? And in trying to understand myself is where I started to zoom out and understand the people around me and then understand how I relate to others. So it's like a whole journey of getting to know who I am through the people that I was attached to. So there weren't many people, and there still aren't many people that I really attached to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
In my mind, I was looking at you in a third person perspective, walking through all these moments. And I personally share a lot of what you had or what you have been through also in my life. So I understand what you mean. And I think it's always difficult to talk about until you talk about it. And it's like, okay, now this is me.
Pandora's box is open. You just gotta let it go.
But I'm curious when you said he calling you said, hey, we want to break up, didn't affect you as much as he said, stop my location and find my, and did you feel, you said this was for you more controlling, wasn't it? I don't know if you have ever thought about it, that maybe this was how you were raised to know if someone loves you, because your mom always asked you, hey, where are you?
Yeah.
And maybe this was how you knew how you love someone, by knowing where they are.
Yep.
And if they are safe rather than the control aspect.
No, when I meant controlling or like control, it wasn't about controlling. It was more like me feeling like I'm in control of the situation. Like I can understand, what's gonna, like, for example, if I see on the phone that he is on a specific highway, then I know which direction he's going. I'll know if he's going home or if he's going somewhere else. And then I'll be able to anticipate that, okay, if he goes home, then he's probably gonna eat and then he's probably gonna sleep. So he doesn't have to keep telling me where he is. I can give him his space. But then I also soothe myself because I am very perceptive of patterns and routine. And routine was so important to me. And the parallel you made with my mom is exactly spot on. Because that is where the sense of importance over where someone is and if they're safe being more important than anything else, anything about how they're feeling, how they feel towards me, or what their plans are, or any of the more emotional aspects, it didn't have that much value. And my mom too, like, regardless of whether we were fighting that day or if we were having a good day, it always brought me so much anxiety to miss, like, I know there's so many memes about this, like you missed 2 calls from your mom and all the hordes of hell are on you.
That's true.
But the amount of anxiety I would feel missing a single phone call from my mom, to the point where I would be sweating and shaking to call her back, and or miss so many texts from her, because she would spam text me. She would send me like 24 messages at a
Where are you?
Where are you? Yeah.
Why don't you not answer me? Are you alive?
And she would do this when I'm at university, when I'm going out with my friends, if I'm going for dance training, if I'm going to the gym. And the only time that she wouldn't be reaching out to me is when she knows that, okay, I'm actively in a class, or I'm actively training, or like I'm actively like away from my phone. Yeah. And I was fine with that, Mom. Don't get mad. I was fine with that for a long time. And then we had a talk about it when I was here. Because that's when we actually sat down and I was like, no, listen, this, I understand. I started to understand why she does it because I started doing it, right? I started doing it with my partner. I started doing it in general with my mom too sometimes. And at that point, she had already let go of me to a little bit, to the point where she wasn't, too trying to know where I am too much. But then I, in some kind of reverse psychology moment, started yelling at her, why are you not responding to me? And then I realized, like, nah, this thing is the first thing that I think needs closure. Like, I need to explain to her how much anxiety that did cause me, to the point where I couldn't enjoy even me time. Even if I'm like going for a drive by myself, no plans in particular, I'll be back at a certain time. Even then, like, I would do sometimes risky things, like text when I'm about to approach a stoplight or something like that, to tell her that, yeah, I'm here.
I'm fine.
Yeah. Fine, I'm okay. And we actually had that conversation only after I noticed that I was doing it, and we were able to understand that, no, this is just something that she does to make sure that I'm okay. And our relationship is so tight because we've depended on each other for a lot of things in our lives, to the point where if you lose sight of the other person, it can send us into a panic. And we were each other's anchor. So a huge transition was trying to make that healthier than what it was. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm curious how. So this was with your mom. Mm-hmm. Now going back to your dad, because you said he wasn't a good role model. What happened with your dad? Did you ever talk to him about how it was for you as a kid?
Yeah. My mom has also been the lead behind many of those conversations. I think after a point, especially now recently, I had to come to a certain amount of acceptance that at the end of the day, my dad and I are just really different people. And there are some things that it's not that I have forgiven him for a few things, but it's really hard to forget. And accepting that. And I've had conversations with him as well, more recently, that I'm okay with I'm okay with the loss of a typical dad-daughter relationship. I'm okay with that. We're friends now. We see eye to eye now, especially that I'm working and I'm, a bit more involved into the adult life, meaning we get along a bit better. We have more to talk about. We share the same sense of humor. I'm fine with that relationship. And I know still that, I'm pretty sure there's parts of him that might still be upset with some of the things I'm saying today, but I know I feel stronger within myself to be able to even have a conversation with him after this. And that I'm okay with where we are now. And that's what we've talked about, basically. There have been so many times where my mom would try to say that, no, it's important. You need to be there for her. You need to be here. And oh wow, actually, I'm just realizing this now. He has many times tried to tell us that he doesn't have the emotional capacity that we need him for. And he has communicated that, which is already a big step for him. And it took me a long time to really accept that, no, you know what? He was trying in his own way. And I can't blame him for not having the right upbringing. I can't blame him for not having the right resources, the right role models himself. And that's, what the kids like to call generational trauma.
I was exactly thinking about the same word.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just looking at this perspective.
Yeah.
Because for us, I don't know, blaming our dad can be easy. It's like the first person that you find to blame. Yep. But I think just for a second, looking back and looking at that father as a little boy, that how was he grown up? Did he get the love did his parents tell each other that they loved them? Or no, they were busy doing job and working and providing for the family. Yep. And maybe that way, or whatever, the way he tries to be there for you is not necessarily the way you want him to be. Yep. But accepting the fact that this is what he can give.
Exactly.
And the accepting this, for me, I think is very, and for everyone, is a very big thing. That just look at your parents as a little kid.
Yeah.
How were they raised? Did they get the love and the compassion and things that they wanted or they needed? And they probably didn't know it. Like right now we know it because with the rise of social media and internet, everybody is thinking about this kind of stuff more. But I think the last generation, it was not really a thing.
Absolutely, 100%. There's ironically an Instagram trend I see going around, and it's specifically about moms. And it's like these daughters that post their mom saying, sometimes you just need to realize that your mom is just a little girl living in the world for the first time. I'm like, yeah. Dads too. Everybody are just little kids living in the world for the first time. Yeah. And I love how realizing those things, like simple, small, but impactful realizations, can have so much influence on things like forgiveness, things like acceptance, things like awareness. Because it really puts things into perspective. Because at some point you start to realize that, well, shit, there are some things you just can't control. It's just like that.
You have to accept.
Yeah. And move on.
Amazing. Yeah. I have some questions.
Go for it.
I think, okay, I want to ask a question in the context of relationships. Mm-hmm. How much do you think it's important, the presence of an empathic female in a family? And what are the unique strengths a woman can bring to that relationship so the man can feel safer, for example?
Mm-hmm. This ties back to, remember what I was saying earlier about how it's important to consider the other half of the community, right? When you're looking at specific issues. And I'm going to say something very controversial. We might have some argument about.
No, we love arguments in.
But biologically speaking, and this is biological fact, that the male and female species bring their own set of strengths and weaknesses that are inherently intended to complement each other. One of them being the woman being so emotionally in tune. I'm not sure that a lot of people would think about it this way, but we kind of have to be. You know what I mean? We kind of have to be more emotionally in tune because we have hormones doing every single thing every single day in a different way. And it's survival instinct to be more in touch, to understand what signals the body are giving you, to know if something's going off or how you need to conduct yourself in a certain way to make sure you're functioning most optimally. And I'm speaking purely science here. So this is survival instinct. Having any sort of female figure in a family unit or in a group unit brings with it so much strength, because that amount of emotional in-tunedness, it would be really hard, not unachievable, but really hard for the male counterpart to achieve. It takes a lot of time, a lot of breaking down, a lot of self-awareness, a lot of putting yourself in different sorts of perspectives. And sometimes the composition of the brain itself does not allow you to go to a level that someone else might. And it's, again, the argument that human beings can never be 100% perfect. Having, just as much as it would be necessary to have a practical, strong, whatever you want to call it, male individual in a group or in a unit or in a relationship, having a female kind of perspective or a feminine perspective, if you will, is absolutely necessary. That's where the balance is. And I wouldn't say that it's the feminine or the feminine individual's goal to make the space safer? Because then I wouldn't put all of that responsibility on one person. Mm-hmm. You can't have one person make a space safe. You need two. Everything needs more than one. So, but that doesn't make either one less important to be involved.
And then on the same note, do you have any tip for the women that are listening to the podcast? They have a male around them that it's difficult for them to talk about their emotions, or how do you encourage them to provide a platform or a way to navigate this kind of conversations?
Zoom out. Just zoom out of whatever the situation is at hand. This is very cliched, but a very common tip in relationship psychology or group psychology or family psychology is that it's not X versus Y. It's X and Y versus the situation.
X and Y being the male and the female?
Whoever you want to call it. 2 units in a relationship. You're trying to get me cancelled.
I thought you were talking about the XY chromosomes.
No.
Okay. I got biological. To all the nerds in home.
Chromosomes. That's another fascinating topic. Evolution is another fascinating topic. But anyways, I digress. Any unit, whether it's a family, whether it's a group of friends, whether it's a couple, it's not you versus the other person. It's you guys versus the problem. And understanding that, like being able to compartmentalize, being able to separate or accept that tendency to villainize or blame the other person, accept it, realize that, okay, at that moment you're feeling frustrated because A or B person is saying this or doing this that you're not happy with. Take a moment to accept that by yourself and then zoom out just a bit. Look at all of the events or all of the whole situation that led up to that moment. And then zoom out just a bit more. Try to see what do you have on your plate or what do you bring with you that made you react in these ways to the situation that happened. Not necessarily to the person. We've already taken a step away from that. But why are you reacting the way that you're reacting? And then zoom out just a bit more of why is the other person reacting the way that they're reacting. And really take the time to consider all of this before you sit down and compare notes with the other person. And taking that time to really look at everything from every possible angle is so important. And that's for in a relationship, that's for the partners. That's their responsibility to be able to do that. In a family unit, it's everybody's responsibility to be able to do that. Understand the value of taking time to look at it from every possible angle before saying things that maybe you don't intentionally mean. Or doing some damage. That can really go a long way.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we are getting sadly to the end of the episode. Do you have any final thing to say? If you want to leave people with a final advice, this is your time.
Of course, I would want to end on a controversial note. I want to actually share one of the first philosophies that kind of encouraged me to consider zooming out. Consider, looking at things from perspectives that are bigger, broader than myself. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
You're not special. And the whole depth behind someone saying that you're not special, it helps with that victim mentality. It helps with the tendency to villainize. Because then you start to realize, when something happens and you start thinking, oh my gosh, life is so unfair. Oh my gosh, that person never understands me. Oh my gosh, everything is just going to shit. Take for a moment to consider, You're not special, that everything is a catastrophe. It's not just happening to you. It's not the whole world against you. As much as we love to say that, oh, I'm the main character in my own movie, yeah, but there are other movies running as well that might have a few parallels. And it really humbles you. So I will leave it at that.
Yeah, I will also leave it at that. I'm not going to add anything to it. Thank you very much, Nikki.
Of course.
This was an episode I really enjoyed. I hope people listening at home or watching us on YouTube or Spotify we also have some live audience. So I hope they also enjoyed listening to us. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day, night, evening, morning, driving your car, riding a bus, sitting behind your desk. This is Hearts Wide Open. Please leave a 5-star if you're listening to our podcast, sharing with your friends. Come to our events. Now we're having events and we're going to have more and more. We're looking forward to see your face. Yeah, that has been it. Thank you very much. See you in the next episode of Hearts Wide Open. Bye.